So I think transdisciplinarity is a critical feature in an area as complex as addiction. Addiction is such a complex disorder.
One of the things that's been great about IMPART, it's provided a forum for people from very different disciplines and perspectives to come together, and where we can help share ideas with students in different disciplines.
Well, IMPART, I think, fits in this most important place of advocating for and actually enacting transdisciplinarity, right? It's really bringing people from multiple disciplines and sectors together to talk about how can we evidence and deliver the kind of system of care that is needed.
I'm very mainstream epidemiology in the Faculty of Medicine, right? So I can speak the language of medicine and of the system. The other people that maybe do the more qualitative interviews, looking at voyages or personal stories, looking for the underlying themes that come out in there that can yield really new and interesting ideas, are often on the margins. And people would say, oh, I was going to mention the analogy yesterday is, they're out in the hills, they're out in the sticks. And my point would be, you know what, there's gold in those hills. There's little nuggets that can change the way we do things, but we've got to pay careful attention and really look to what's there and appreciate each other's strengths and work together.
The concept of transdisciplinarity, to begin with, I think for the people that come to the IMPART program, there is some sort of openness to begin with. Some sort of openness to wanting to expand your view, not only learning how to do a sex and gender analysis, for example, or intersectional analysis, but learning from what other people have to offer from very different views and perspectives.
Well, a lot of our mentors and trainees talk about the excitement involved in being part of IMPART and the stretch that they're forced to make. And once they successfully make it, they talk about the creativity they feel, the joy even that some of them feel. One of our mentors is convinced that transdisciplinarity is the key to going forward in all of health research, and that at some stage we will have an epiphany about that collectively, and that there'll be a renaissance in health research. Another mentor says that including sex and gender in health research is the essence of transdisciplinarity, because you're forced to merge two very different perspectives, a social and a biological.
You know, I love that intersection between research and clinical work, because we're a team. You know, clinicians and researchers, where clinicians and researchers together can generate clinical questions that are important to answer, and then can collaboratively work together to figure out how to answer these questions with a research model that's relevant to clinical practice, and then at the end of it all, to figure out how we're going to change clinical practice based on the research that these lovely PhDs have done for us.
So IMPART not only brings together sort of the disciplines of mental health or mental illness or mental well-being, and the other disciplines of addiction, substance abuse, because believe it or not, they work in very different silos, and the services are very siloed. They do not talk. They often exclude each other, leaving the most vulnerable youth to fall, and we don't say fall through the cracks, we say pushed through the cracks by the system. So IMPART brings that together, and those different research methods, that mix of the qualitative, the interviews, seeing why people feel the way they do, why that ends up that way, combining it with the hard data that someone like me can collect, is just extremely valuable. When you're making a pitch to a politician, having those personal stories, combining that with hard numbers, you kind of start to fire on all cylinders, and that's how you can really make change happen.
It became very clear that you can't even begin to work on this problem unless you have a transdisciplinary perspective. And if we can make governments and policymakers understand this perspective and what it means to work together in a transdisciplinary way, and get them to fund this kind of transdisciplinary work, I think we will make much faster strides in being able to develop appropriate treatments and interventions for mental health problems and addiction.
That idea of sex and gender-based analysis, integration of trauma and other linked issues, and transdisciplinarity, it's not a matter of how they will help. It's a matter that they're just essential. Like, we just have to do this. And, you know, there's so many ways in which the science supports that, the sort of community understanding supports that, and I feel that it's just a matter of doing it now. It's not a matter of justifying it anymore. We've got the evidence. We know that it needs to be there. Let's get on with it.
You know, this concept has been around since at least the 1960s and earlier, but is still a fairly, it's still yet to be taken up in more of a groundswell type of way.
I know people are going back and reflecting. I certainly have many times gone back and thought, you know, what is the link between us? If, you know, it seems like a big, you know, long way to us being able to find common ground.
It's been a great run. Very exciting to build a community of researchers who share common goals, but who come from totally different places and disciplines and directions and have different interests, who've addressed so many different substances and different forms of addiction behavior.
You know, that's the beauty of having academic discussions in some ways, is that people are used to, you know, challenging each other. Well, what do you mean by that? But this over here says this, you know. And in some ways I feel very happy to have been part of a community that includes those discussions where we don't really understand each other. We never can totally understand each other. I will never totally understand Joanne Weinberg's fabulous research on the HPA axis and how stress is involved in, you know, in addictions necessarily. But, you know, it has been so great to struggle to cross that chasm, you know, and she and I have had wonderful conversations about, you know, how that, you know, the implications of her work for my work in pregnancy and substance use. So she may be working with rats, but she, you know, she's working to understand things that we need to design pregnancy outreach programs. And I think that's, to me, what's really been fun. And you could say difficult. I haven't really found it difficult. I've found it kind of inspiring and exciting to be part of those discussions.
I always learn a huge amount being part of the group, interacting with clinicians, hearing all the issues that they're investigating. It makes me think back about my animal research. So while I'm more focused on biological sex and sex hormones and how those impact every other system of the body, which they do, and which we can look at all levels, from behavioral to molecular levels, and we do.
I think that the greatest gift that IMPART has left us all is connections to each other. So I would not hesitate to call up any trainee or mentor in the future, either to collaborate, to get their advice on a research problem I'm having, or to address a complex problem that has emerged. So I think those relationships are the important legacy piece of IMPART that will go forward and change addictions research and practice.